Thomas Bennett sat across from yet another blind date, his hands wrapped around a simple cup of coffee. At 52, with touches of gray threading through his dark hair, and the kind of quiet demeanor that came from years of building a successful software company from the ground up, he'd learned that wealth attracted the wrong kind of attention. The man in the worn leather jacket and faded jeans looked nothing like the CEO whose name appeared on quarterly business reports, and that was exactly how he wanted it. His daughter Emma, now 26 and working at a pediatric clinic across town, had been the one to encourage him back into dating after 5 years of widowhood. "Dad," she'd said over Sunday dinner, "Mom wouldn't want you eating takeout alone every night. She'd want you to find someone who makes you smile again." So he'd tried. Lord knows he'd tried. But every date seemed to follow the same script. Mentions of exotic vacations, hints about investments, questions that probed just a little too carefully into what he did for a living. Tonight's date had lasted exactly 20 minutes before she'd excused herself to the restroom and never returned. Thomas couldn't even remember her name now. He sat there in the small downtown café, watching the evening crowd through windows that framed the city lights like paintings. He should have felt disappointed, but mostly he just felt tired. "More coffee?" The voice was gentle, with a warmth that made him look up. The waitress stood beside his table, coffee pot in hand. She appeared to be in her mid-40s, with kind eyes and dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her white shirt and black vest were neat, despite what had clearly been a long shift. There was something genuine in her smile, the kind that came from actually caring about whether someone's evening was going all right. "Please," Thomas said, pushing his cup forward, "and I'm sorry you had to witness that." She poured with a steady hand, and he noticed the name tag pinned to her vest. "Sarah." "Witness what?" she asked, though her eyes held understanding. "I just saw someone enjoying our excellent coffee on a Thursday evening." He found himself smiling for the first time that night. "That's a generous interpretation." "Well," Sarah said, setting the pot down and pulling out the chair his date had abandoned, "I've been working here for 3 years, and I've learned that the quality of the coffee matters a lot less than the quality of the company." She paused, then added, "I'm on my break. Mind if I sit? You look like you could use a friendly conversation that doesn't involve checking the time every 5 minutes. Thomas gestured to the chair, surprised by how much he welcomed the company. "Please, I'm Thomas." "Sarah," she replied, though he already knew. She wrapped her hands around a cup of water, and he noticed the wedding ring was absent, but a faint tan line suggested it hadn't been gone long. So, Thomas in the nice leather jacket that'd seen better days but was clearly expensive once. "Are you going to tell me about your evening, or shall we talk about something more interesting?" He laughed, genuinely laughed, and it felt good. "You're very observant. Comes with the territory," she said. "You learn to read people in this job. Not in a judging way, just you notice things, like how someone ordered the cheapest thing on the menu but left a $20 tip last week. Or how another person spent 15 minutes complaining about the temperature of their soup but never said thank you once." She took a sip of water. You've been nothing but polite, even when your date walked out. That says something." Thomas found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in months. "It's complicated," he admitted. "Dating at our age, I mean. Everyone comes with history. Everyone's been hurt. Everyone's careful." "Careful is good," Sarah said thoughtfully. "But there's a difference between being careful and being closed off, between protecting your heart and building walls so high nobody can climb them." She smiled softly. "Sorry, that's probably too much philosophy for a Thursday night." "No," Thomas said quickly. "It's exactly right, actually. They talked for 20 minutes that felt like 5. She told him about her 2 teenagers, about how she'd taken this job after her divorce 2 years ago to make ends meet while going back to school for a nursing degree, about how hard it was to start over at 44, but how it also felt like finding herself again after years of being who everyone else needed her to be. He told her about Emma, about the hole his wife's passing had left, about how he'd thrown himself into work because it was easier than facing an empty house. He didn't mention the company's worth or the investments or any of it. And for the first time, that wasn't because he was testing someone. It was because none of it seemed to matter. "My shift ends in an hour," Sarah said eventually, glancing at the clock with obvious reluctance. but I should probably get back to it before my manager thinks I've abandoned ship. She stood, then hesitated. Thomas, can I tell you something? Of course. Whoever walked out tonight, she's going to regret it someday. Not because of anything she'll find out about you later, but because she missed the chance to know someone who orders coffee and says please and thank you, and whose eyes light up when he talks about his daughter. She picked up the coffee pot. That's worth more than most people realize. Thomas watched her return to her work, moving between tables with practiced ease, and something shifted in his chest. A week later, he came back to the cafe, not for a date, just for coffee, and to see if Sarah was working. She was, and her face brightened when she saw him. Thomas, the usual? The usual, he confirmed, though he'd only been there once. She remembered. This became a pattern. Tuesday and Thursday evenings he'd stop by after work, still in his casual clothes, still just another customer as far as anyone knew. They'd talk during her breaks, conversation flowing like they'd known each other for years instead of weeks. She told him about her classes, about the elderly patient she'd shadowed, who'd held her hand and called her an angel. He told her about a project at work, carefully vague about details, and about how Emma had noticed he seemed happier lately. Want to know a secret? Sarah asked one evening, leaning across the table during a quiet moment. You're my favorite part of these shifts. Not because you tip well, though you do, but because you listen like you actually hear what I'm saying. My ex-husband, wonderful man in many ways, but he never really listened. He'd nod and make sounds, but you could tell his mind was somewhere else. Thomas felt his heart constrict. Sarah, I need to tell you something. She tilted her head, curious but not worried. Okay, I haven't been entirely honest with you. About what I do, about... He paused, suddenly afraid that the truth would change everything. Change her. I own a software company, a successful one. I have money, Sarah. A lot of it. He waited for her expression to change, for that light in her eyes to shift from genuine warmth to calculation. It was what always happened. Instead, Sarah was quiet for a moment, then she smiled. Thomas, I've known since the second week. You, what? Honey, I Googled you. Your picture's on your company website. She laughed at his expression. You're not as incognito as you think. The jacket might be worn, but those are custom shoes. And you have that look people get when they're used to making decisions that affect hundreds of people. She reached across the table and touched his hand gently. But here's the thing. I didn't care then, and I don't care now. I like you because you made me laugh when I was having the worst day. Because you asked about my kids' names and remembered them. Because you noticed when I was stressed about my finals and brought me tea instead of coffee that night. Thomas felt something break open inside him. Something that had been locked tight since his wife died. I've been pretending to be broke to avoid people who only care about money. And I've been pretending not to know you're not broke, waiting for you to trust me enough to tell me yourself. Sarah squeezed his hand. We're both a little foolish, aren't we? Can I take you to dinner? The words tumbled out. A real dinner, not here, not during your break, just you and me? Her smile was radiant. I'd like that. But Thomas, can we still come here sometimes? This booth, terrible coffee and all, this is where you found me. Where I found you. That matters. 6 months later, Thomas brought Sarah back to that same booth. Emma had met her by then, had hugged her tight and whispered, "Thank you for making him smile again." Sarah's teenagers had grilled him thoroughly and grudgingly approved. But tonight was just the two of them, sitting in the warm glow of the cafe where it all started. You know what I realized? Thomas said, holding both her hands across the table. I spent so much time testing people, trying to find someone who'd want me without the money. But you didn't want me for the money. And you didn't want me despite it either. You just wanted me. The whole complicated, messy, hopeful person. Sarah's eyes glistened. That's all any of us really wants, isn't it? To be seen for who we are, not what we have or don't have. Marry me, he said simply, not because it makes financial sense or because we're getting older or because people expect it. Marry me because I can't imagine my Tuesdays and Thursdays without you, because you make me want to be brave again. She laughed through happy tears. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. The other waitress, covering Sarah's old section, came over with champagne the manager sent over, and the regular customers who'd watched their slow-building romance applauded. It wasn't a grand gesture in a fancy restaurant. It was perfect because it was real, in the place where a man who'd forgotten how to trust and a woman who'd forgotten her own worth had found each other again. Sometimes kindness shows up in unexpected places. Sometimes it wears a waitress uniform and remembers how you take your coffee. Sometimes it sits down during a break and offers the kind of conversation that reminds you why connection matters. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it becomes the beginning of something that makes the second half of life even richer than the first.